everyone. Welcome to Realist Quill. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Sleep paralysis is a fascinating yet terrifying phenomenon, where individuals find themselves conscious but completely unable to move or speak. This occurs during the transition between sleep stages, typically when falling asleep or waking up. During these episodes, many people report sensing a malevolent presence in the room, feeling pressure on their chest, and experiencing intense fear. What makes sleep paralysis particularly noteworthy is its prevalence. Roughly 8% of the general population experiences it regularly, with up to 40% reporting at least one episode in their lifetime. These experiences often leave such profound impressions that sufferers seek communities like Reddit to share their encounters and find validation. The line between waking and dreaming becomes blurred during sleep paralysis, creating a uniquely terrifying state where nightmares seem to leak into reality. Cultural interpretations throughout history have attributed these experiences to supernatural forces, from demons and witches to alien abduction. However, modern science offers explanations that are perhaps no less unsettling. Our brains awaken while our bodies remain paralyzed, a natural protection mechanism gone awry. Reddit has become a digital campfire where users gather to share their most unsettling experiences, with communities like Our Paranormal and Our Sleep Paralysis serving as repositories for thousands of first-hand accounts. These stories stand out not only for their similarities across different cultures and backgrounds, but for the raw emotion that comes through in each telling. The following stories were selected based on their vivid details, the unique aspects of each experience, and the profound impact they had on those who experienced them. While scientific explanations exist, these accounts remind us of the thin veil between our conscious mind and the mysterious realm of sleep. What makes these Reddit accounts particularly valuable is their authenticity. Unlike crafted horror stories, these are real experiences from real people seeking understanding, not literary acclaim. Many report feeling relief at discovering they're not alone in their experiences, finding community among fellow sufferers who understand the unique terror of being trapped between wakefulness and sleep. I was 19 when I had my first sleep paralysis episode. I woke up around 3 a.m., but couldn't move. The room was darker than usual, like the darkness had substance. Then I noticed a tall figure standing in the corner, completely black, like a shadow had peeled itself from the wall. It slowly moved toward my bed, each step deliberate and unnatural. As it approached, I tried desperately to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The figure leaned over me, its face inches from mine. It had no features except for two piercing white eyes. I felt its cold breath on my face as it whispered something in a language I couldn't understand. The pressure on my chest was unbearable, like someone was sitting on me. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I finally managed to move my fingers. The shadow man instantly dissipated, and the room returned to normal. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and kept all the lights on for weeks afterward. The strangest part was that this wasn't a one-time occurrence. The shadow man has visited me 6 times since then. Each time he approaches more boldly, sometimes touching my face or hair with hands that feel like cold leather. I've rearranged my furniture, moved apartments twice, and even tried sleeping medications, but nothing keeps him away consistently. I've spoken to my doctor, who explained the scientific aspects of sleep paralysis, but that knowledge doesn't make the experiences any less terrifying. The shadow man feels real in a way that transcends rational explanation. I've started keeping a journal by my bed to record details immediately after each episode. My boyfriend witnessed one of my episodes last month. He said I was completely rigid, my eyes wide open but unblinking, and making a faint whimpering sound. He tried to wake me, shaking my shoulder and calling my name, but I remained locked in that state for almost 4 minutes. When I finally came out of it, I was drenched in sweat and couldn't stop shaking for hours. What disturbs me most is that some small part of me has started to anticipate these visits. I've caught myself thinking about the Shadow Man during the day, wondering when he'll return. It's almost like he's become a dark companion in my life, unwelcome but strangely familiar. Sometimes I wonder if acknowledging his existence has given him more power over me, or if my fear somehow feeds whatever he is. My sleep paralysis manifests as a home invasion. I'll wake up to the sound of my front door opening and footsteps approaching my bedroom. I can hear multiple people whispering, planning what they're going to do to me. Then my bedroom door creaks open, and dark figures enter. I'm completely awake but frozen. Sometimes they just stand around my bed watching me. Other times, one will sit on my chest while others search through my belongings. The worst part is that I can feel their weight on my bed and their breath on my skin. What makes this particularly terrifying is that I live alone in a not-so-great neighborhood. So the fear of an actual break-in is already there. Even though I know it's sleep paralysis, my brain processes it as real danger every single time. The first few episodes happened sporadically throughout my 20s, but they became much more frequent after I moved into my current apartment. The layout is similar to the house I grew up in, where I experienced childhood trauma related to an actual home invasion when I was 11. My therapist believes there might be a connection between that event and the content of my sleep paralysis episodes. The intruders have distinct personalities in my mind. There's always a leader, a tall man who directs the others with hand gestures rather than words. There's a smaller figure who moves erratically and seems excited, almost childlike in their movements. And there's a third presence that stays in the doorway, keeping watch. I never see their faces clearly, but I recognize them instantly each time. During one particularly intense episode last winter, the leader leaned down and spoke directly into my ear. His voice was distorted, like someone talking through an old radio. But the message was clear. We'll keep coming back until you let us in. I've never been more terrified in my life. When I finally broke free from the paralysis, I immediately checked every lock in my apartment, and even pushed my dresser in front of the door before I could calm down. I've tried various preventative measures. Sleeping with a nightlight helped briefly, but the episodes adapted. The intruders now use flashlights that cut through the ambient light. Sleeping pills made it worse, trapping me in the paralysis for longer periods. The only thing that's made any difference is sleeping on my side rather than my back, which seems to reduce the frequency, though not the intensity. My doctor suggested it might be related to stress, and there's probably some truth to that. The episodes are more common during difficult periods at work or when I'm having financial troubles. But there's also a strange pattern where they often occur 3 nights in a row, then disappear for exactly 2 weeks before return. That predictability feels almost intentional, like they want me to anticipate their arrival. In my culture, sleep paralysis is called old hag syndrome because people often see an elderly woman during episodes. I never believed in it until it happened to me. I was staying at my grandmother's house in rural Maine, sleeping in an attic bedroom that hadn't been used in years. Around 2 a.m., I woke up feeling strange. The moonlight through the window was unusually bright, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I tried to roll over but couldn't move a muscle. That's when I noticed her, a hunched figure of an elderly woman in the corner of the room. She wore an old-fashioned nightgown and had long, stringy gray hair that partially obscured her face. Her hands were gnarled with unusually long fingers that ended in sharp points, more like claws than human hands. She noticed me watching her and slowly turned her head. Her face was gaunt, with sunken cheeks and eyes so deeply set they looked like empty sockets. But the worst part was her mouth, stretched into an impossibly wide grin that revealed blackened teeth and gums. The old woman began shuffling toward my bed, her movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being operated by an inexperienced puppeteer. Each step she took made the floorboards creak, even though I knew logically this was all in my mind. When she reached the edge of my bed, she leaned over me, her face hovering inches from mine. I could smell her breath like musty old books and something rotting. She placed her hand on my chest, and the weight was unbearable. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't. She began to whisper in a language I didn't understand. But somehow I knew she was reciting names, the names of everyone who had died in that house over the generations. My grandmother had told me stories about relatives who had passed away in that very room, including her own mother. The paralysis finally broke when a car drove by outside, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. The old woman disappeared, but the feeling of dread remained. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I didn't mention the experience to my grandmother, but as we were having breakfast, she looked at me strangely and asked if I'd slept well. When I hesitated, she nodded knowingly and said, "She visits everyone who sleeps in that room eventually." My mother used to call her the night keeper. My grandmother explained that several family members had experienced similar visitations over the years. According to family lore, the night keeper was the spirit of a distant relative who had been the caretaker of the house in the early. She had supposedly gone mad after losing her husband and children to influenza, spending her final years wandering the halls at night, checking on empty bedrooms. I've experienced sleep paralysis many times since then, but never with the same intensity. The old hag appears occasionally, but she's less substantial now, more like a faded photograph than the terrifyingly solid presence I encountered that first night. What unsettles me most is that my cousin later stayed in the same room without knowing my experience and described seeing an identical figure. We've never found historical records of anyone matching the description of the night keeper, but the consistency of the sightings across different family members makes me wonder if there's something more to it than just a sleep disorder. My sleep paralysis demon doesn't approach from the sides of the bed or from the corners of the room. It comes from above. The first time it happened, I woke up unable to move and immediately felt something was wrong with the ceiling. When I managed to look up, I saw what appeared to be a human figure splayed across my ceiling like a starfish. Its limbs were unnaturally long and bent at impossible angles. Its skin was pale gray and seemed to adhere to the ceiling as if it were sticky. At first it didn't move, and I thought perhaps it was just a strange shadow or a hallucination that would quickly fade. Then its head rotated 80 degrees to look down at me, though the rest of its body remained motionless. Its face was mostly featureless except for enormous black eyes and a tiny mouth stretched into a circular shape, as if perpetually surprised. Slowly, it began to move, crawling across the ceiling with jerky, insect-like movement. Each time one of its limbs detached from the surface, there was a wet, sucking sound. It positioned itself directly above me, and then began to lower its face toward mine, its neck extending impossibly, like a telescope unfolded. When its face was about a foot from mine, it opened its tiny mouth, which expanded to reveal rows upon rows of needle-like teeth. A thick, dark liquid began to drip from its mouth onto my face. I could feel each drop, cold and viscous, but couldn't wipe it away due to the paralysis. This exact scenario has repeated dozens of times over the past 3 years. I've consulted sleep specialists, tried medication, even had a priest bless my apartment. Nothing has stopped the visits from what I've come to call the ceiling crawler. The strangest development occurred 6 months ago when I moved to a new apartment in a different city. I was hopeful the change would disrupt the pattern. For 2 wonderful weeks, I slept peacefully. Then one night, I woke to a familiar sensation of dread. I looked up, and there it was. But something had changed. The crawler had brought friends. 3 identical entities were now arranged in a triangle pattern on my ceiling, all staring down at me with their black eyes. They've appeared as a trio ever since, always in the same formation. Sometimes they communicate with each other through a series of clicks and whistles that sound almost like a language. I've started recording my sleep with an audio device, hoping to capture these sounds, but the recordings always contain nothing but static during the times I know they were present. My latest theory is that these entities exist in a spectrum of reality that overlaps with ours only in certain mental states. Sleep paralysis might be a window that allows us to perceive beings that are always present, but normally invisible to us. I know how that sounds, but after years of these experiences, it's getting harder to accept the standard medical explanation. My sleep paralysis entity is more subtle than most I've read about, but no less terrifying. There are no monstrous appearances or violent actions, only a woman who sits at the edge of my bed and whispers. She appears as an ordinary-looking woman in her 30s, dressed in contemporary clothes, usually jeans and a plain t-shirt. Her hair is brown, shoulder length, and her face is unremarkable. If I passed her on the street, I wouldn't look twice. This normalcy somehow makes the experience more unsettling than if she were obviously supernatural. During episodes, I'll become aware of her weight on the edge of my mattress first. Then I'll see her sitting with her back to me. She always begins the same way, whispering so quietly I have to strain to hear. I know you're awake. I can tell when you're pretending. She never turns to face me directly. Instead, she speaks over her shoulder, keeping her face partially obscure. The whispers gradually become more disturbing. As the episode progresses, she recites details about my life that feel invasive. Comments about conversations I had that day, items I purchased, or thoughts I had while alone. Things no noter could know. The most chilling episode happened after I'd moved into a new apartment. No one knew my address yet, except for my immediate family. During sleep paralysis that first night, the whispering woman said, "I like what you've done with the place. The blue chairs by the window are my favorite part." I had indeed purchased blue accent chairs that day and placed them by the window. I've tried setting up cameras to capture these episodes, but technology always seems to malfunction. Batteries drain inexplicably, recordings get corrupted, or the camera shuts off precisely during the times she appears. The one partial recording I managed to obtain contained no visual evidence of another person, but did capture an unexplained whispering that was too faint to make out the words. My episodes occur roughly twice a month, usually during periods of high stress or when I'm sleeping in a new environment. I've noticed a pattern where they're more likely to happen when I sleep alone after having grown accustomed to having someone else in the bed. The first night after my ex-boyfriend moved out was particularly intense. The whispering woman stayed for what felt like hours, detailing the reasons my relationship had failed, some of which I hadn't admitted even to myself. Meditation and strict sleep hygiene have helped reduce the frequency of episodes, but nothing has eliminated them entirely. What disturbs me most is the growing suspicion that the whispering woman doesn't arrive when the sleep paralysis begins. Rather, she's always there, just beyond perception, and the sleep paralysis simply allows me to detect her presence. My sleep paralysis began shortly after my wife and I moved into a Victorian-era home in Massachusetts. The house needed considerable renovation, and we spent our first few months tearing out old wallpaper and replacing damaged plaster walls. During one of our renovations, we discovered old children's drawings hidden behind the wallpaper in what would become our bedroom. They were crude crayon illustrations of stick figures, with disproportionately large hands and heads. We thought it was charming at the time, evidence of the families who had lived here before us. 3 days after finding those drawings, I experienced my first episode of sleep paralysis. I woke around 3:15 a.m., completely immobilized. The first thing I noticed was a scratching sound coming from inside the walls, like multiple small hands scraping against the plaster. The sound circled the room, moving behind all four walls in a clockwise direction. Then came the giggles, high-pitched, childlike laughter that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. Simultaneously, I tried to wake my wife but couldn't move or speak. My eyes could only track the progression of the scratching sounds as they moved around the room. Suddenly, the scratching stopped directly behind our headboard. There was a moment of complete silence before a small, pale hand broke through the fresh paint and plaster. The fingers were unnaturally long and moved with jerking, puppet-like motion. A second hand emerged beside it, then a third and fourth from different spots along the wall. The hands began to pull at the wall, tearing away chunks of plaster to create ragged holes. Through these openings, I could see small faces peering out, children with hollow eyes and stretched, grinning mouths. They looked similar to the stick figures in the drawings we'd found, with oversized heads and hands, but rendered in 3 dimensions. One by one, the children began to emerge from the walls. Their bodies were emaciated and moved with unnatural fluidity, as if they had additional joints in their limbs. They climbed onto our bed and began to arrange themselves around my paralyzed body, some sitting cross-legged near my feet, others perching on the headboard above me. The smallest one, who appeared to be about 5 years old, crawled onto my chest and leaned close to my face. In a voice that sounded like rustling paper, it whispered, "We've been waiting for new playmates." The last ones didn't last very long. My paralysis broke at sunrise and the children vanished, leaving no trace of their presence. The walls were intact, showing no signs of the damage I'd witnessed. My wife had slept peacefully through the entire event. I might have dismissed it as an isolated incident of sleep paralysis, but the episodes continued with increasing frequency. The children always emerged from the walls, always around the same time, and always with new whispered threats or invitations to join them inside. After the 5th episode, I did some research into the history of our house. I discovered that in the early 1900s, a family of 6 had lived here. Parents with 4 children ranging from ages 5 to 12. According to local newspaper archives, all 4 children died within a week of each other during a diphtheria epidemic. The parents moved away shortly after, and the house changed hands multiple times in the following years. I convinced myself that learning the history would somehow diminish the power of the experiences, that understanding the possible source of my brain's imagery would make it less terrifying. I was wrong. The episodes continued, and the children became more aggressive, sometimes leaving scratch marks on my skin that remained visible in the morning. We're in the process of selling the house now. My wife thinks I'm having stress-induced nightmares, and doesn't believe there's anything supernatural occurring, but she's concerned enough about my deteriorating mental health to agree to move. Until we can leave, I've taken to sleeping in our guest room, though it hasn't stopped the visits. If anything, being alone seems to embolden them. I've had occasional sleep paralysis since my teens, but it was always the standard experience: waking up immobilized, sensing a presence, feeling afraid. That changed 3 years ago when my episodes took on a new and much more disturbing quality. It began on an ordinary night in my apartment. I woke up unable to move, instantly recognizing the familiar sensation of sleep paralysis. I prepared myself for the usual shadowy figure or sense of dread, but instead something completely different happened. I became aware that the room itself was breathing. The walls expanded and contracted in a slow, rhythmic pattern, like the rise and fall of a chest. The ceiling stretched upward as if inhaling, then lowered during exhales. Even the floor beneath my bed seemed to undulate gently. It was as if my entire bedroom had become the interior of some vast living organism. With each breath the room took, the air pressure changed noticeably. During inhalations, my ears would pop and I'd feel an uncomfortable suction, as if the room were trying to draw something out of me. During exhalations, the air became thick and humid, carrying a faint organic scent reminiscent of wet soil and something metallic. Most disturbing was how the furniture responded to this breathing. My dresser, desk and bedside table would contract and expand slightly, not as independent objects, but as if they were part of the room's flesh. The wood grain on my closet door rippled like muscle fibers. During one particularly intense episode, I noticed a change in the wall across from my bed. A seam appeared, running vertically from floor to ceiling. As the room exhaled, the seam parted slightly, revealing a dark, glistening surface underneath that pulsed with a distinct heartbeat. I had the horrifying impression that what I was seeing was the room's actual skin beneath its clothing of drywall and paint. The episodes always end the same way. The breathing gradually slows until the room gives one final shuddering exhale. Everything returns to normal dimensions, and my paralysis breaks moments later. These experiences have fundamentally changed my relationship with my living space. I've moved twice since they began, but the phenomenon follows me regardless of location. I've started to believe that it's not about the physical space at all. Rather, it's revealing something about the nature of reality that is normally hidden from us. My current theory is that what we perceive as solid, stable matter is actually in constant flux, breathing, changing, alive in some fundamental way. Sleep paralysis somehow allows me to perceive this hidden aspect of reality, much like how certain hallucinogens are said to reveal patterns and connections normally filtered out by our conscious mind. I've spoken with several sleep specialists about these experiences, most attributed to an unusual manifestation of hypnagogic hallucinations, possibly complicated by anxiety or an underlying medical condition. I've undergone sleep studies, MRIs, and psychological evaluations, all of which have come back normal. The experiences don't frighten me as much as they used to. There's a strange comfort in witnessing the breadth of my surroundings, as if I'm being reminded that everything, even seemingly inanimate objects, participates in some great cosmic respiration. Still, I often find myself watching my walls carefully in waking life, half expecting to catch them in mid-breath. My sleep paralysis manifestation is uniquely personal. I see myself. The first episode happened after I installed a full-length mirror in my bedroom, positioned so that it reflects my bed. I woke up paralyzed in the middle of the night and immediately noticed my reflection in the mirror. Except I wasn't moving, so my reflection shouldn't have been moving either. But it was. My mirror image was sitting up in bed watching me with an expression of detached curiosity. While I was frozen in paralysis, it had complete freedom of movement. It tilted its head, examining me from different angles. Then it smiled, not a friendly smile, but something predatory and knowing. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything that might break the paralysis, but remained completely immobilized. Meanwhile, my reflection slowly got out of the mirrored bed and approached the glass. It placed its palms against the surface from its side, leaning close as if trying to see me better. Its lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Reading its lips, it appeared to be saying, "Let me out," over and over, with increasing urgency. Let me out. Let me out. After what felt like an eternity, my paralysis broke. The reflection instantly reverted to mimicking my movements normally. I immediately covered the mirror with a sheet and left the lights on until morning. I considered getting rid of the mirror, but ultimately decided that would be giving in to irrational fear. I convinced myself it was just an unusually vivid hallucination, brought on by the strange experience of seeing myself in a mirror while in a sleep paralysis state. That rationalization worked until the second episode a week later. This time, I woke to find my reflection standing at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep. It was no longer confined to the mirror world. When it realized I was awake and aware, it smiled that same cold smile and raised a finger to its lips in a shushing gesture. It walked slowly around to my side of the bed, its movements slightly off, too fluid, almost like it was moving underwater. It leaned down close to my ear and whispered, "You're sleeping in my bed." Its voice was mine, but with a subtle wrongness to it, like hearing your recorded voice played back. The third episode was even more alarming. I woke up in the position I normally sleep in, on my right side facing the wall, but I could see myself. my back, my hair splayed on the pillow. As if I were standing behind myself looking at my sleeping form. I had somehow become the reflection, viewing my body from the outside. In panicked confusion, I watched as my body rolled over and looked directly at me. It smiled and said, "It's not permanent yet." But soon, I've had 7 more episodes since then, each escalating in its implications. During the most recent one, I found myself trapped in the mirror world, watching my reflection live my life. It got up, moved around my room, checked its phone, my phone, and even practiced facial expressions in the mirror, looking directly at me as it did so. When my alarm went off and the paralysis broke, I was back in my body, but left with a deep sense of unease. How would I know if we had permanently switched places? Would I even realize it if my reflection had taken over my life, while I remained trapped in the mirror? I've taken to marking my arm with a small pen mark before sleeping. It's a simple test. If I wake up and the mark is there, I'm still me. So far, the mark has always been present, but I find myself checking it multiple times throughout the day now. I've tried sleeping in rooms without mirrors, but my reflection finds other ways to appear in windows, metal surfaces, even the black screen of my turned-off television. Medication has reduced the frequency of episodes but hasn't eliminated them entirely. Psychiatrists suggested that this particular manifestation might represent issues with self-identity or dissociation, that I'm literally facing aspects of myself I'm uncomfortable with. That explanation makes sense intellectually, but doesn't account for the persistent feeling that my reflection is waiting for an opportunity to replace me permanently. My sleep paralysis differs from most accounts I've read because it involves a temporal element. Each episode feels like being caught in a time loop where the same few minutes repeat with subtle variations. It always begins the same way. I wake up at exactly 3:47 a.m. according to the digital clock on my nightstand. I'm paralyzed but fully conscious. My bedroom door, which I always close before sleeping, is open about 6 inches. Through this gap, I can see a sliver of my hallway where a shadow passes by at exactly 3:48 a.m. At 3:49 a.m., the shadow returns, pausing outside my door. The door opens wider, creaking slightly. At 3:50 a.m., a figure enters, humanoid but wrong in proportions, with elongated limbs and a head that nearly touches my 8-foot ceiling. It approaches my bed slowly, reaching my side at precisely 3:51 a.m. It leans down, its face coming into view. Here's where the variations occur. Sometimes the face is featureless, just smooth skin stretched over a skull. Other times it has too many features, multiple sets of eyes arranged in patterns, or several mouths that all move independently. In some iterations, it wears the face of someone I know, usually a deceased relative or a childhood friend I've lost touch with. At 3:52 a.m., the figure always says the same thing: time is running out. Then something happens that causes my paralysis to break. A sound from outside, my partner stirring in sleep, or sometimes just an autonomous physical jerk of my body. The moment I can move again, the clock resets to 3:47 a.m., and the entire scenario begins again. The shadow passes by the door, pauses, enters, approaches, an exact repeat, except for the face, which is always different. This loop typically repeats 5 to 7 times before I finally wake up completely to find it's actually a different time altogether. Usually around 6. What makes this particularly unsettling is the precise consistency of the timing. Even if I try to resist sleep on nights when I suspect an episode might occur, I invariably wake to find it's 3:47 a.m. when the paralysis sets in. I've tried setting my alarm for 3:45 a.m. to preempt the experience, but on those nights I either sleep through the alarm or the episode occurs at a different time, breaking its usual pattern. I've had my home checked for carbon monoxide and other environmental factors that might cause hallucinations. I've been evaluated for temporal lobe, epilepsy, and other neurological conditions. Everything has come back normal. The most disturbing development came 6 months ago. During a routine doctor's appointment, I mentioned these episodes to my physician, describing them as interesting but manageable sleep phenomena. His face went pale. He revealed that another patient of his had described nearly identical experiences. Same time, same figure. Same message. That patient died in his sleep 3 weeks after reporting the experiences to my doctor. I've managed to track down the widow of this patient. According to her, her husband experienced intensifying sleep paralysis episodes for approximately 4 months before his death. In his final weeks, he reported that the time loop was getting shorter. The figure was arriving earlier in each iteration, giving him less and less time. The last thing he said before going to sleep on the night he died was, "I think time has finally run out." My episodes have recently shown signs of the same pattern. The figure now sometimes appears at 3:48 a.m. instead of waiting until 3:50 a.m. The message has also occasionally changed to, "Your time is running faster." I've started documenting everything, sharing my experiences with sleep researchers and asking my partner to monitor me closely during sleep. I don't know if these episodes represent a real phenomenon with actual danger or if they're elaborate constructions of my subconscious mind. Either way, the countdown feels very real, and I can't shake the conviction that something is approaching with each passing night. My sleep paralysis experiences began during my second year of graduate studies in neuroscience. I was researching consciousness and sleep states, often working late in the university lab before returning to my apartment for a few hours of rest. The irony of developing a sleep disorder while studying sleep wasn't lost on me. The first episode was textbook sleep paralysis, wakefulness, immobility, terror. But mine came with a specific apparition, a man in a white lab coat standing at the foot of my bed taking notes on a clipboard. He looked like a doctor or researcher, middle-aged with gray hair and glasses, completely ordinary except for his eyes, which were solid black from corner to corner. He seemed to be conducting some kind of observation, occasionally making notations and checking what appeared to be monitoring equipment that I couldn't quite see. He never acknowledged that I was conscious or observing him back. After several episodes featuring this same figure, I began to think of him as the researcher. He never spoke or interacted with me directly until the 5th visit, when he finally looked up from his clipboard and said in a clinical tone, "Subject shows increasing awareness. Adjustment to protocol recommended." On subsequent episodes, I noticed thin, wire-like attachments connected to various parts of my body, my temples, chest, wrists, and ankles. They led to devices resembling scientific instruments that the researcher would adjust while making notes. I could feel a subtle vibration or current running through these connections, not painful but definitely perceptible. As a scientist myself, I tried to approach these experiences analytically. I recorded details immediately after each episode, looking for patterns or inconsistencies that might reveal their true nature. What I found was disturbing consistency. The researcher's appearance never varied. The equipment became more elaborate, but remained fundamentally the same, and there seemed to be a progression in whatever study he was conducting. During the 10th episode, a second figure appeared, a younger woman also in a lab coat, who consulted with the researcher in hushed tones. I couldn't make out most of their conversation, but caught fragments: neural mapping complete, consciousness transfer protocols, and most disturbingly, subject viability approximately 3 months. By this point, I had discussed these experiences with colleagues in the sleep research department. Some suggested I was incorporating elements of my daily work into hypnagogic hallucination. Others proposed more radical theories, that intensive study of consciousness had somehow altered my perception, allowing me to observe aspects of reality normally filtered out during wakefulness. One colleague even suggested, half-jokingly, that perhaps I was actually the subject of interdimensional research, being observed during sleep when the barriers between realities were thinnest. I dismissed this idea as fanciful, until the night both researchers addressed me directly. I woke in paralysis to find them standing on either side of my bed. The researcher held up a device resembling a tablet, and showed me a complex 3-dimensional model of what appeared to be a brain. My brain, I somehow knew. Certain areas were highlighted in different colors, with one region, at the center, pulsing with an intense blue light. "Your consciousness research has activated dormant neural pathways," the woman explained. You've become an ideal bridge subject. Bridge to what? I managed to ask, surprising myself by breaking the typical speech paralysis. Between your reality and ours, the researcher replied. We exist in a parallel research dimension, studying consciousness transfer. Your work mirrors ours, creating a unique resonance. They proceeded to explain that they had been using my sleep paralysis states to gradually prepare my consciousness for temporary transfer into their dimension. My research papers in waking life were apparently developing theories remarkably similar to their established science, creating a harmonic convergence that made me uniquely suitable as a test subject. The preparations are nearly complete, the woman said. Soon you'll be conscious on our side for extended periods. And what happens to my body here? I asked. The researcher's expression remained neutral. It will appear to be in a deep sleep state. As long as the connection is maintained through the anchor points we've established in your neural architecture, you'll be able to return. And if the connection fails, neither answered directly, but the woman made a notation on her clipboard. We should proceed with the final calibration, she told her colleague, ignoring my question. Since that night, my episodes have evolved. I no longer wake in my bedroom with researchers standing over me. Instead, I wake in what appears to be their laboratory, a vast white space filled with equipment far more advanced than anything in my university lab. My perspective is from a reclined position on an examination table, and I'm still paralyzed, but I'm clearly in their world rather than mine. During these visits, they conduct various tests, asking me to focus on different thoughts or memories, while they monitor readings on their equipment. They explain aspects of their work, much of which aligns with theoretical models I've been developing in my waking research. The parallels are too specific to be coincidental. Most concerning is the increasing duration of these episodes. What began as experiences lasting a few minutes now sometimes continue for what feels like hours. I've started wearing a sleep tracker, which has indeed recorded unusually long REM cycles corresponding to these extended episodes. After my most recent visit, I found a small mark behind my ear that wasn't there before. A tiny triangle of 3 dots that looks almost like a tattoo. My dermatologist couldn't identify it, and suggested it might be some kind of birthmark I'd never noticed, which I know isn't the case. I've considered discontinuing my consciousness research, wondering if that might sever whatever connection has been established, but my waking work has been producing breakthrough results, directly inspired by what I'm learning during these visits. My department recently secured a major grant based on my latest paper. The scientific part of me wants to dismiss these experiences as elaborate dreams informed by my work, but another part, perhaps the part the researchers have been cultivating, recognizes something profound is occurring at the intersection of different realities. The question I'm now facing is whether to resist or embrace whatever process has begun. Sleep paralysis occurs in the borderlands between sleep and wakefulness, specifically during transitions to or from REM, rapid eye movement sleep. During normal REM sleep, our brain paralyzes most of our muscles, a natural protection mechanism preventing us from acting out our dreams physically. Sleep paralysis happens when our mind awakens while this paralysis is still in effect. Neurologically, several brain regions play key roles in sleep paralysis episodes. The amygdala, responsible for processing fear and emotional responses, often becomes hyperactive during these episodes, explaining the intense terror most sufferers experience. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which would normally provide rational assessment of the situation, shows reduced activity, making it difficult to logically process what's happening. The hallucinations associated with sleep paralysis, whether they involve shadow people, malevolent entities, or intruders, are technically known as hypnopompic when waking up, or hypnagogic when falling asleep. Hallucination. These occur when dream imagery intrudes into wakefulness, creating vivid perceptual experiences that seem entirely real. Research suggests that sleep paralysis experiences are influenced by a combination of factors: disrupted sleep schedules, shift work, jet lag, and insufficient sleep, all increase the likelihood of sleep paralysis episodes. Sleep position. Sleeping on one's back, supine position, is associated with higher frequency of sleep paralysis. possibly because this position can lead to breathing difficulties that trigger the brain to partially wake. Psychological factors, stress, anxiety, PTSD, and other psychological conditions correlate with increased incidence of sleep paralysis. The content of hallucinations often reflects personal anxieties or cultural influence. Genetic factors. There appears to be a hereditary component, with sleep paralysis clustering in families regardless of cultural background. While the neurological mechanism is universal, how people interpret and experience sleep paralysis varies dramatically across culture. In Newfoundland, the experience is called old hag syndrome. In Japan, it's known as kanashibari. In Thailand, Phai M, and in Brazil, pisadera. Each culture has developed its own explanatory framework, from witches and demons to aliens and government experiments. Interestingly, while sleep paralysis itself is not considered dangerous, it's often associated with narcolepsy and other sleep disorders that may require treatment. For most sufferers, however, it's a terrifying but ultimately harmless phenomenon that occurs periodically throughout life. Sleep paralysis, insights and coping strategies. Managing sleep paralysis begins with understanding that while terrifying, these episodes are not physically harmful. This knowledge alone can reduce the anxiety that often exacerbates the condition. Several strategies have proven effective in reducing the frequency and intensity of sleep paralysis. Regulate sleep patterns. Maintaining a consistent sleep schedule, going to bed and waking up at the same times every day, can significantly reduce episodes. Sleep deprivation and irregular sleep patterns are strongly correlated with sleep paralysis. Sleep position. Since sleeping on your back increases the likelihood of sleep paralysis, training yourself to sleep on your side can be helpful. Some people attach a tennis ball to the back of their sleepwear to prevent rolling onto their back during sleep. Creating an optimal sleep environment with minimal noise, comfortable temperature, and appropriate darkness can improve overall sleep quality and reduce episodes. Stress management. Since stress and anxiety can trigger sleep paralysis, incorporating stress reduction techniques such as meditation, deep breathing exercises, or yoga into your daily routine may help. Cognitive behavioral therapy has shown promise for those whose sleep paralysis is anxiety-related. Focus on small movements. During sleep paralysis, try to focus on moving the extremities, a finger or toe, rather than attempting to move your entire body at once. This small movement can sometimes break the paralysis. Control your breathing. Maintaining slow, deep breathing can help reduce panic during an episode and may help terminate the experience sooner. Eye movement. The muscles controlling your eyes remain functional during sleep paralysis. Making rapid eye movements can sometimes help break the paralytic state. Mental techniques. Some sufferers report success with mental strategies like focusing on a positive image, mentally singing a song, or even embracing the experience with curiosity rather than fear, which can diminish its power. For those with severe or frequent episodes that significantly impact quality of life, medical intervention may be necessary. Treat underlying conditions. If sleep paralysis is a symptom of narcolepsy or another sleep disorder, treating the primary condition often resolves the sleep paralysis as well. Medication. In some cases, certain antidepressants that suppress REM sleep may be prescribed to reduce episodes of sleep paralysis. These are typically only considered for severe cases that don't respond to lifestyle modification. Sleep studies. If sleep paralysis is frequent or accompanied by other symptoms like excessive daytime sleepiness, a sleep study may be recommended to rule out conditions like sleep apnea or narcolepsy. Many sufferers find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Online communities like the sleep paralysis subreddit provide spaces where people can share experiences and coping strategies. These communities help normalize the experience and reduce the isolation many sufferers feel. Understanding the phenomenon scientifically doesn't make the experience less real or frightening in the moment, but it does provide a framework that can reduce the long-term psychological impact. By recognizing sleep paralysis as a natural, if unsettling, neurological event, rather than a supernatural occurrence, Sufferers can develop a sense of control that ultimately diminishes the power these episodes hold over them. For most people, sleep paralysis remains an occasional, albeit terrifying, intrusion into an otherwise normal sleep pattern. With proper management strategies and support, its impact on quality of life can be significantly reduced.